Welcome, everybody, to the Investors Podcast 2.0 Wealth Mindset, where we dive into the minds of the successful real estate entrepreneur to uncover the tips and tricks that have allowed them to keep moving forward. I am your host, Scott Bauer, and I'm excited that you're here with us. Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of the Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bauer, and gosh, once again, today I'm excited to be here. We've got Avery Carl with us out of Destin, Florida. And she has a company that focuses on, it's a real estate company, of course, but they focus in the short-term rental business, it sounds like. Avery, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal. Like I said, really excited to be here. Why don't you give the listeners a little bit more about kind of your background and what you're focused on now, and we'll kind of get started here.
Okay, sure. So I am first and foremost an investor. I own 32 units. 6 of them are short-term rentals, 5 in the Smoky Mountains, and then 1 in Destin, Florida. I'm under contract on a couple more, actually. And to make a long story short, when I first started buying, my strategy for investing, I'll back up even a little further, is I invested in my short-term rentals first. And because those make so much more cash flow than just traditional long terms, I bought all those first, and now I take all of the income from those and invest that into more traditional long-term single families. We're actually looking at maybe getting a 12 unit here shortly. So the investing in the short-term rentals is even though it is still real estate investing, is a good way to just build up the extra capital more quickly to go buy more real estate. So when I first started buying, I noticed that when I was buying in the Smoky Mountains, that's where my first one was, that none of the agents could answer any of my questions about return on investment or cash on cash return or cap rate or, any of those real estate investor terms, or even occupancy rate, or how to manage any of these things. So I became that agent and bridged that gap, and I built a really big real estate team that we're now in 3 states. We're in the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge market in Tennessee, Destin, Panama City in Florida, and then Gulf Shores, Alabama. And what we do is we help short-term rental investors obviously identify the properties that are going to have the highest potential. Then we also train them on how to manage them themselves remotely from their smartphone from anywhere in the world, so that they don't have to put a big chunk of their cash flow into a property manager, so that you can also take all of that money and really bootstrap and squeeze every last dollar out of that investment to go buy more investments.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And I have some questions I think that the listeners might have questions on as well. The majority of people out there think, well, let me rephrase the question. Why do you think that those real estate agents didn't have the answers that you were looking for? Why do you think that was or is?
Well, I think, the majority of real estate agents don't specialize in any certain part of real estate. They just, they're taking as many clients as they can, which, that works for a lot of people. But I think that it's because they weren't investors themselves, and it's difficult. There's very few real estate agents that actually own investment properties. So I think it's just because they had never done it that all they could do was recommend a property manager, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I asked that question because, I think that people look towards real estate agents as the professional and as the person that they could turn to for answers. And is that how you kind of saw the niche that you could chase after and saw kind of an opportunity to bridge that gap and be that resource for individuals out there that, they could rely on, because you knew kind of the investment terminology that would ultimately tell them whether it was a good investment or not to buy an Airbnb or a vacation rental in general?
Yeah, it wasn't really a true light bulb moment like that, so much as it was first a friend of mine said, "Oh, how much are you making on this? Find one, teach me how." And then it became a few more friends, and then a few acquaintances of theirs, and then it became an actual business that I focused on and streamlined and created processes around.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I think that happens for a lot of people. But Avery, let's back up a little bit, because you have a pretty exciting story, right? You went to school in Texas. University of Texas at Austin, and then you joined a rock and roll band after that. Is that right?
Yes.
Traveled the world and started a rock and roll band, and that's where you met your husband, right?
Yep, it is.
So, the transition from, Texas scholars, Texas person, Texas, somebody going to Texas, to a rock and roll person into real estate. How did you make that transition?
Okay, that's a really good question because it is quite a jump, but it doesn't sound like as much of a jump when I explain it. So I've always played guitar and loved like classic punk rock 70s and rock and roll music. And so I grew up in a really small town in Mississippi, and I happened to be really good at soccer. So I always kind of saw that as my ticket out of the small town. And Austin was a really cool music town. So that had a lot to do with why I chose Texas. It was a really good soccer program also. I won a Big 12 championship while I was there, but it was just a really good, fun, all around choice. And I graduated in 2008. There were no jobs. I was already in a band that was touring. So I just said, well, we'll do this for a while and do some bartending, because there were no jobs for recent grads. And ended up did a little time in Los Angeles and then also New York. I met my husband when I lived in New York. He owned a bar at the time, and he's also a DJ on Sirius XM. And we got kind of sick of New York because it was expensive and hard to do anything. Moved to Nashville. I went and got my master's, started working on the business side of music as a marketing manager. And then, just like most real estate investors, pretty quickly realized I'm not a good employee, and real estate investing was kind of a way to get myself out of that. It was a means to get myself out of the rat race. And so here we are.
And so here you are, absolutely. And, it sounds like you've been, obviously you're all over the country. You went from LA to New York to Tennessee, and now you find yourself in Florida, right? Mm-hmm. So you've been all over the country. Did you start off, so what got you into the actual real estate side? Where did you decide that, hey, because a lot of people find out that they're not employees, but they don't automatically turn to real estate as their option. Right.
Yeah. So when we made the move from New York to Nashville, our agent at the time was trying to get us to buy in a super hip, quickly appreciating area of Nashville. But coming from New York, we just didn't want any neighbors. So we bought a place out in the country. And then we had some more money left over, and we thought, oh, well, maybe we should buy one of those places, not even knowing that it's a terrible idea to invest based on appreciation. We didn't even know it was called real estate investing. We were like, we're going to buy a rental house and see how that goes. So luckily, we made a really good choice on which one. We still have it. It cash flows $1,000 a month on top of the mortgage. So once we got the first rent check on that, we thought, oh, this is pretty awesome. We need some more of these. And then we started doing that, listening to podcasts and seeking out the education and reading books and learning about how to do this the right way. And we had one down payment's worth of capital left. Said, how can we best maximize this to make the most money possible so that we can buy more and more quickly? That's how we came upon the short-term rental thing. Didn't want to do it in Nashville because the regulations are just too crazy there. So we went to the Smoky Mountains, which is about 3 hours east of Nashville. And because it's been the norm there since the 70s, that's what people do when they go to the Smoky Mountains, is rent a cabin, but not a hotel. So right. That kind of became the type of market that we focus on, is only those true vacation markets where people have been renting privately owned properties on an overnight basis rather than hotels for decades. Yep. Because those generally have not only the best returns, but the most friendly short-term rental regulations as well.
Yeah, amen to that. That's definitely the truth. And so, you start buying these houses, and then you got your license, right? Mm-hmm. You're now a licensed agent in these different areas. Do you primarily focus on the retail side, or are you only focused on helping people to buy these vacation rentals and showing them how to do it efficiently and to maximize the dollar that they're able to make on it? Is it a brokerage? Is it a brokerage? Is it, what is the business model specifically?
Yeah. So our broker is technically EXP, just because I don't want to bother with actually being the broker and doing all that paperwork and stuff. So we have it's a real estate team within EXP, and what we do is just regular agent stuff, but we only work with investors. That's it. No primary homes, not even long-term rentals. Only short-term rental investors.
Okay. And would you say that, we kind of talked about this briefly ahead of the call, so short-term rental clients that you have that come in there, you only show them how they can maximize their profit, but you do not offer like a property management software, property management for those different clients. Why is that?
Oh, because I manage my own, but you couldn't pay me enough to manage other people's. Because right now, when I'm managing, I only answer to the guests. But having to answer to the guests and then also the investor is just not the highest and best use of my time. I'd rather focus on my own portfolio. I'm happy to teach other people how to do it and build their portfolio, but I don't need to benefit after their sale. I'll help you do it. I'll help teach you how, teaching a man to fish basically,
Right.
is our model.
Well, what I was really wanting to get out for, because there's a lot of listeners on here that have short-term rentals, have had short-term rentals, are thinking about buying short-term rentals. And so, the pros and cons of like having a property manager and not having a property manager. Personally, I had a few vacation rentals where I had a property manager, and they take about 25% of the profit that you make on those deals, right? Every single month. So they really significantly cut into your profits that you're going to get out of the deal. However, you save your time because you're not dealing with the tenants, you're not dealing with the cleaning crews, you're not dealing with those things. So can you weigh in on that a little bit? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the best use of time in order to just do it yourself? Or how does somebody, really expand and own 100 of these things without, does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of automation tools available that were not available when I first started. We use channel managers, pricing managers, calendar managers. So I don't ever have to communicate with my cleaning person unless there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
She automatically gets a calendar update when she has to be there. I really never have to mess with pricing. We use a pricing manager for that dynamically prices our property based on not only what other properties are charging in the area, but local events, holidays, things like that. It's always pulling in more data on how to price things. And then the channel manager sends you can set it up to automate a lot of different things. It pulls all your listing data into one dashboard from Airbnb and VRBO, wherever else you have it listed. So if you're going to make an edit to your listing, you only have to do it once, and it blasts it out to all of them. It sends auto messages to guests. So it automatically sends guests check-in instructions 24 hours before check-in, automatically sends them checkout instructions 24 hours before checkout. So really the only time we actually have to answer a question is if a guest asks us something really specific, like, hey, where's your crock pot? So with all the automation tools, it kind of runs itself to where it's only about 30 minutes a week that you're spending on one property. And just like with anything, if you scale big enough, you are eventually going to have to outsource those processes. But most of my clients are looking to really take every dollar that they can out of the property and scale more quickly. Once you get to a point where you feel like you're scaled enough, then it doesn't really make a difference.
Right. Yep. No, absolutely. That's for sure true. So you mentioned earlier in the call, that you make a lot of money on these types of properties. Why would somebody not want to do it? Why would somebody choose the vacation rental versus a long-term rental, or why would they not want to have those?
There are a lot of limiting beliefs. And I mean, just like with long-term rentals, everybody's got a story about their uncle who owned an apartment building and it's one of the tenants burned it down or something like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of limiting beliefs surrounding real estate investing in general, but specifically short-term rentals because people think they're just going to be bothered by guests all the time. And, it's definitely something that will interrupt you at some point, interrupt your dinner at some point. But like, you're not going to get middle of the night calls all the time. And even if you did, there's no reason you can't handle it in the morning. It's just like everything's a phone call. Just like if the toilet breaks in one of my properties 2,000 miles away, I'm going to do the same thing as if a toilet breaks in the bathroom that's 10 feet from me, is make a phone call. Right. So people that don't tend to do well with short-term rentals are people that don't really have the ability to roll with the punches or be adaptable. People that are very rigid and need everything to be very organized. It's just when you're dealing with the general public like that, things are not just neat and tidy and black and white. So those are the people who it might not work as well for.
Yep. No, I can't agree with that more. You certainly have to run with the punches, and things do happen and they do come up. And I think for those of you that are listening to this call that are thinking about doing vacation rentals or short-term rentals in general, having just a Rolodex of people you can call when problems come up makes your life that much easier. That's another problem that I've dealt with in the past, is not having, the resource to call when a problem arises, and therefore you feel like you're stuck. You have to go take care of the problem yourself, which is very far from the truth. Next question is, we're all going through this COVID-19 craziness, is what I like to call it. Some people that had vacation rentals here in Scottsdale, Arizona, really got creamed. I got some of my buddies that, that have quite a few, and when COVID-19 hit, their bookings stopped. So how did you deal with that? How do you continually deal with that? Did you have a lapse in some of your bookings, and were you able to, recover some of those costs, or, what? And it's an honest question, because, I'll just let you answer that first.
Yeah. So that's a really great question. I've seen that the metro markets and the big fly-to vacation markets like Hawaii and Orlando have really had a hard time recovering. We did in our markets, March and April, books wiped clean. And cash reserves are something that I could spend an entire other podcast talking about. Yes. We did not have to dip into our cash reserves those 2 months because all of our properties except for one have good internet. And as soon as people that live in drivable big metro areas saw that they were going to be working from home for a month, that might live in small condos, thought they rebooked with us and said, hey, we have to work from home. I live in a small condo. Can I rent your place for 2 weeks and work from there? And so we were able to just break even those 2 months on that. And then once May hit and things started opening back up, the tourists came back with a vengeance. We are not only 100% booked, but we're getting higher prices per night than we've ever seen. And I think that's because people are dying to get out of their houses, but they don't want to get on flights and they don't want to go to big cities. So they're doing the 5 to 8 hour drive vacations to where they can be in control of their environment and, doing the weekend vacation spots like the Smokies and Destin. So we've been really fortunate that COVID kind of caused a boom in our markets, but definitely the metro and the fly-to markets are still suffering.
Yeah, and I think it did the exact opposite of what most of us thought was going to happen, which is a really good thing, and that is that it came back with a vengeance. I mean, people want no more now, though, to get out of town and go to, a secluded area or a vacation rental somewhere where they can get out of their house. And so that has been a very good thing. Where do you think it's going to go? Let's fast forward 5 years from now, 10 years from now, into the future. Where do you think the short-term rental market is going to go? And, why should maybe an investor listening to this call today think about maybe getting into the short-term rental space?
I think that the mature vacation rental markets are, they've been what they are for decades, and they're going to stay what they are for the next few decades. I think the biggest changes are going to be seen in the metro markets because Airbnb and short-term rentals are a relatively new thing in those markets as of the past 15 years. So you have a lot of clashes with city council because of disgruntled neighbors and hotel lobbyists. So I'm going to see what's going to happen with the metro markets, but that's kind of why I've chosen the markets that I've chosen, because I grew up going on vacation to these markets, renting short-term rentals, and my parents did too. So that's probably not going to change in our lifetimes in the markets that I'm in.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's definitely a good point. I think it's an interesting type of asset class. It's not really, it can fluctuate a lot, but like you said, in certain areas, it's pretty consistent over time. Have you ever considered, transitioning? Do you have any? You said you have long-term rentals now as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think about those compared to your short terms? Do you like those? Not like those? Why do you have those?
So I'm a big believer in a diversified portfolio, and also the whole point of real estate investing, or at least for me, is to get to a large enough portfolio, which for me is 100 units, and then I'll regroup, um, to where, you know, you're not having to do any work on anything. The income is just coming in, and, you know, you're just a real estate investor. And I, for at that point, I might not self-manage my short terms anymore. But for the time being, when I need all the cash flow I can to go throw it back into more real estate, I'm going to keep self-managing. So at the point that I feel like I don't need to scale anymore, then I won't. But my long terms are a little different. They are C-class, pretty low income. So it's a completely like opposite end of the spectrum, really, from short-term rentals. And for the most part, they're pretty good. You know, every now and then we have some problem tenants. Usually they're inherited tenants from the previous owner. You have to evict. We've got one right now that we can't evict because the eviction moratorium, but you know, they do exactly what they need to do for us. So I'll keep buying. I'll probably keep buying both asset classes until I decide I'm done buying stuff altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's, you know, rentals are good. You're also, you know, participating in the appreciation of that asset over time as well, and decreasing your debt if you have any on it. You know, the renters are paying that down for you. So there's certainly benefits to both sides. Avery, it's been good to kind of have you today. Do you have any last things you want to tell our listeners about your vacation rental business, or how you might be able to help them before we get into our lightning round?
Oh, yeah. So if you're interested in buying in any of the markets that my team works in, which, in case you haven't heard me mention it a zillion times on this podcast, are the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, the Florida Panhandle, and Gulf Shores, Alabama, then we will not only, you know, help you get into the property, we will train you on everything you need to know end to end to be able to manage remotely if you would like, if that's the route you want to go. That's no extra charge. It's just value add for our clients. And you can find me at my website, shorttermshop.com.
Yep. Awesome. Well, let's get into our lightning round. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. First question is, how does your mindset have to change in order to get into the short-term rental market if you're a traditional long-term rental investor?
There's a little more customer service involved. So, I mean, if you've ever waited tables or bartended or done anything in the customer service space, you're not going to have a problem with it. But, you know, people who have never worked in those types of industries, it might be a little bit of a mindset challenge of just, you know, not letting it affect you emotionally. If somebody's not happy with something, just, you know, fix it, go back to the kitchen, get them what they asked for, and be done with it, move on.
Amen to that. That's a great way to put it. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? I am reading Rob Halford from Judas Priest's autobiography. And also I try to read one non-business book and one business book at a time. And then I am also reading Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday.
Okay. Always interesting to hear what people are reading or what they're getting into, what they're consuming. I appreciate you sharing that for us. What are you trying to learn? You know, if you had to put something that you're trying to learn right now.
Time management.
That's a struggle that we all kind of, you know, deal with. What are you doing specifically to learn about that? How are you getting better at time management?
I am looking at different strategies for time blocking, because my problem is I will sit down to work on one thing and then I'll get an email notification and then I'll check that and then start working on that, and then a text from a client and then I'm over here. So I am working on the best, and there's lots of strategies out there, but the best strategy for just time blocking.
Yeah, amen to that. And it's something that's continuous improvement, right? You're always trying to get better
Right.
at it in some way, shape, or form. So thanks for sharing that. What about, do you have a superpower, something that you feel very strongly about, that you're very good at?
I am very good at memorizing things. So it helps me a lot when clients are like, I was looking at this one property and it had these 2 or 3 features. And I'm like, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street. That one's been under contract 6 times and it's got a foundation problem. So it comes in really handy when I don't have to go look something up when a client has a question about it.
No, yeah, that's certainly useful. Good memory is a good thing, that's for sure. What are you doing to give back, if anything?
At the moment, I am just trying to get through having a newborn. But before we moved to Florida about a month ago. I was working with, there's a running buddy program, ladies running buddy program, where you can run with underprivileged children to kind of teach them, some structure and some, activity stuff. So that, and then also the Girls Rock program, which obviously it teaches girls how to, it's a confidence building program through learning how to play musical instruments and singing and things like that.
Well, I tell you what, as somebody who's tried and continues to try to learn a musical instrument, when you get good at it, there's definitely some self-confidence with that. And so that's phenomenal that you do that for younger people. And thank you for sharing that overall. But last question is, Avery, how can our listeners find you if they want to get involved, buy some properties from you, learn how to vacation rental, any of the above? Where do they find you at?
Everything is on my website, theshorttermshop.com. There's email addresses. You can text me on there. And then all of our social media links. We're on Instagram probably most often. So there's lots of ways to get in touch on my website. Awesome.
Sounds great. Well, thank you for being here today. And for all you listeners out here that have stuck with us up to this point, that means you really liked it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode so that you can share all the information you just learned with everybody that you know. And of course, I'm grateful that you're here. Love being your host, and like to see you here next week for our next episode of the Investors Podcast. Avery, thanks again. We'll talk to you real soon.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.